This is the Tudor Ranger, and like many of Tudor's offerings, it's a watch that draws inspiration from the past with all the modern hallmarks of today's Tudor. It's a timepiece that's adored by many, and rightfully so, given its stylistic choices and robust nature, but it's also a watch that's been ignored or pushed to the side by some and often misunderstood. There are some interesting and familiar design elements at play here, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on the watch after having spent some time with it. Here are the dimensions and specs. The Ranger has a case diameter of 39mm with a lug-to-lug of about 48mm and a lug width of 20mm. It has a thickness of 12mm with 100 meters of water resistance thanks to a screw-down crown, and has 70 hours of power reserve from its MT5402 caliber. The dial here has a very simple composition. We get a matte black dial with printed numerals, indices and minute track. Everything on this dial is printed, text and logo included, so you won't find any sort of applied elements here, giving the Ranger a very flat and one-dimensional look. This is arguably the most contentious part of the watch for most people, and I can definitely see where they're coming from, often labeling it as boring, but I personally don't have an issue with it at all. Instead, I see its simplicity as a selling point and a pro. This is a field watch after all, and I find it works well with the purpose of the watch, focusing on its practicality as well as the look they're going for. This Ranger is essentially a modern rendition of the Tudor Oyster Prince Ranger from the 1960s, and I like that it embraces a similar design, lacking flashy elements for a more muted look that gives the watch a humble feeling. Despite having relatively the same printed execution, same numeral and hour marker layout, and same hand structure as its older counterpart, this modern Ranger has some subtle quirks which offer it its own uniqueness. The printing is done with a slight green tinge, giving it an interesting colour that works to emphasise its field watch aesthetic while also portraying a faux patina that presents a nod to the past and ties in with its heritage theme. The handset is iconic to the Ranger range and DNA and is a great separating element from Tudor's other offerings. They're also quite fitting of the name, as we get a broad arrow hour hand like a Ranger's arrow, coupled with a pencil minute hand and tapering rectangle tipped seconds hand. All hands are polished in their finish and have different shapes for ease of differentiation, but the seconds hand has an added layer of red paint at its tip, which does a lot for the watch. This small addition of red really does a great job at breaking up the plain dial composition, contrasting extremely well against the black dial, and does so without sacrificing the tool watch aim of the timepiece, as it allows for added visibility of that seconds hand as it sweeps, doubling up as a functional aspect. The dial as a whole, with its fine grainy matte texture, faux patina paint and small red accent, work together to give the watch a warm and welcoming sensation when looking at it, and gives us a slice of simplicity without overdoing things. In terms of lume, it's found on the numerals and indices as well as the hands, and has a good level of brightness, emitting a green glow. It isn't anything amazing, but it's adequate, providing enough visibility in low light settings. Coming to the case and bracelet, this is where Tudor's modern influence comes into play. The case is familiar to Tudor, sharing many of the same qualities as its other offerings, and is executed extremely well. The lugs feature slim chamfering which taper and flow from its slab side construction and do a great job at giving the case a sleeker look. The lines of the case are crisp and we find fine brushing throughout, except for a tiny portion of polishing on the edge of the bezel, and this in turn goes hand in hand with the matte dial to present a very under-the-radar appearance. The brushing on the case is done in a circular fashion, contrasting the vertical brushing of the bracelet, which furthers that vintage appeal and also does a good job at highlighting the architecture of the case itself. The bracelet has a simple 3-link construction, appropriate for the overall theme of the watch, and has female end links which are done quite well. They sit slightly lower than the lugs for more of that disconnected vintage look, with a slightly raised middle section, giving us a more defined line, which is a look I prefer to many other female end links out there. The bracelet, in all honesty, isn't anything extraordinary. It's a good bracelet with a solid build, but the clasp is what really elevates it to a great one. Here we get Tudor's T-Fit clasp. It has a similar boxy design to the Lynx and follows the same lines with a fold over lock to keep it secure. On top of that, it has an on-the-fly adjustment system, which is very easy to use and handy when you're on the go. Simply unfold the clasp, hold it in a T position, pull down and slide. It's incredibly intuitive with 5 positions of adjustment and has a very solid action. It's just a great addition to the bracelet in general. On the wrist, the Ranger is a comfortable wear, and those female end links do a lot of the heavy lifting to ensure the watch contours with your wrist, despite the case's rather flat profile. The taper on the bracelet is nice and makes sure the clasp is out of the way, and that on-the-fly adjustment feature has been a pleasure to use, especially during the spring and summer seasons here in Australia. Its 39mm case is in a great spot in terms of size for a majority of wrists, and while the edges of the case can feel sharp when you're handling the watch, I don't notice them at all during wear. Powering the watch is Tudor's MT5402, a COSC certified caliber rated for about -2 to +4 seconds a day. I've yet to have any issues with it thus far, and with my experience with other modern Tudor timepieces, it's safe to say that this will be a reliable movement, and the watch as a whole just embodies this reliable notion. The brushed bracelet and case pair extremely well with the matte black dial and printed elements, giving the watch a very rugged and purpose-driven design, and it's just prepared to be taken on any adventure. It's a watch that can take a beating, hiding scratches far better than a polished watch, and will look good doing so with scratches and wear looking right at home. It's a simple, well-built timepiece with a functional bracelet. It's intentional in its composition with a familiar yet subtle uniqueness, and exhibits a vintage flair with modern execution and precision. The Tudor Ranger is a fantastic watch, and while some may see it as dull and bland, that's what I think makes it so good. I like that it doesn't do too much. I like that it's relatively plain and straightforward, and it stays true to the intent of the watch. The original Ranger was just as uncomplicated and simple, and this modern Ranger does an amazing job at showcasing its lineage and DNA while upping the specifications for the current day. And I personally think Tudor did well with this one. Let me know what you think about the Tudor Ranger. Are you for or against it? Do you like it or do you hate it? I'd love to hear your experiences and opinions. Thank you for checking out the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more watch content. I'll see you in the next one.